a falling apple. The moon above us, every planet in the sky. Isaac Newton showed that the same invisible force moves them all. He uncovered rules that seem to govern both earth and heaven. But Newton guarded some of his greatest ideas for decades. And years later, he secretly broke his own rules, just to make sure history remembered him, and not his greatest rival, as the man who was right. What made a boy who grew up feeling unwanted spend his life searching for rules no one could challenge? Welcome back to Aerospeak. Woolsthorpe Manor, Lincolnshire, England. Christmas Day, 1642. England is in the middle of a bloody civil war. Armies are marching across the countryside, fighting over who should rule the nation. Far from any battlefield, in a small stone farmhouse, a woman named Hannah Newton gives birth to a son. The family are yeoman farmers, not rich, but not poor either, with land and a modest local standing. His father, a farmer with the same name, died 3 months earlier. The baby arrives early and dangerously small. Family stories later claim he was small enough to fit inside a large mug. Nobody expects him to survive the winter. This is a story that begins with loss, before it even begins with a name. When Isaac is only 3 years old, his mother remarries. Her new husband is an older priest, and he does not want a stepson in his house. Hannah moves away to live with him. She leaves young Isaac behind, in the care of his grandmother. As a teenager, Newton starts a strange private habit. He keeps a notebook. In it, he writes down every one of his own sins, one by one. 57 entries in total, in his own careful handwriting. One line admits that he once threatened to burn down his mother and stepfather's house, with them still inside it. At school, he is quiet, and he has very few friends. He would rather build a model windmill or carve a small sundial into a wall than finish his lessons or play with other boys. At 17, his mother, now widowed again, pulls him out of school completely. She wants him to run the family farm instead. He turns out to be a terrible farmer. More than once, someone finds him reading a book under a hedge. Meanwhile, his sheep wander off into a neighbor's field. But an uncle and his old schoolmaster refuse to give up on him. Together, they convince his mother to let him try for university instead. It will turn out to be the only door that ever truly opens for him. In 1661, Newton enters Trinity College, Cambridge. He arrives as what the university calls a subcesar. That means he is a lower status student, expected to serve wealthier students and tutors, cleaning their rooms, running their errands, just to help pay his own way. In 1665, he finally earns his degree. But that same year, plague hits England, and Cambridge shuts its doors. Everyone is sent home. For most students, this feels like a disaster. For Newton, it becomes something else entirely. He spends nearly 2 years alone at Woolsthorpe. No professors, no lectures, no rules to follow. In that strange, quiet stretch of time, he produces some of the most important thinking in the history of science. First, a problem in mathematics. Ordinary geometry cannot calculate something that keeps changing at every single instant. Think of the speed of a falling object, or the curve of a planet's orbit. So Newton invents an entirely new method to solve it. He calls it fluxions. Today, we call it calculus. For the first time, he has a real mathematical language for describing motion itself. Next comes a question about light. Everyone believes a glass prism creates color by twisting white light as it passes through. Newton suspects the exact opposite. He thinks every color is already hidden inside ordinary daylight. The prism, he believes, only separates what was already there. So he tests his idea. He splits sunlight with one prism. Then he lets a single color, red, pass through a second prism. If the prism itself were creating the color, that red light should change again. It does not. The second prism bends its path, but the light stays exactly red. The color was never created by the glass. It was hiding inside ordinary daylight all along. Then comes one more question. By his own later telling, it is sparked by watching an apple fall in the garden. If that same pulling force does not stop at the treetops, he wonders, how far does it actually reach? What if it reaches all the way to the moon? Could it be the very thing keeping the moon locked in its orbit, instead of flying off into space? For the first time, someone is asking whether the sky follows the same rules as the ground. Solitude, for Newton, was never something to escape. Again and again, it becomes the place where his mind works best. He returns to Cambridge in 1667. 2 years later, at just 26 years old, he becomes a professor of mathematics. He builds his own telescope, a new kind that uses mirrors instead of glass lenses, and it wins him a place in the Royal Society. But when he shares his new theory of light and color, a rival scientist named Robert Hooke attacks it in public. Newton reacts with real fury. He refuses to publish anything else for years. Instead, he retreats into private, solitary work, the one kind of work no one can criticize before it is finished. Then, in 1684, an astronomer named Edmund Halley travels all the way to Cambridge with one specific question. If a planet moves twice as far from the Sun, its pull becomes 4 times weaker. Under a force like that, what shape would the planet's orbit be? Newton answers instantly. An ellipse. Halley is stunned. Newton had already solved this exact puzzle, alone, years earlier. And he never told a single person. What else has this man been sitting on, in complete silence? Halley convinces Newton to write it all down properly, once and for all. Newton spends the next few years doing exactly that, working with such intense focus that he sometimes forgets to eat. In 1687, funded by Halley himself, he publishes a book, Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica. In it, Newton lays out 3 laws of motion. First, an object keeps moving the same way unless a force changes it. Second, the stronger the force, the greater the change in motion. Third, when one object pushes another, the second object pushes back with an equal force. Then Newton adds one more great idea: universal gravitation. Every object pulls on every other object. An apple pulls on Earth. Earth pulls on the apple. The sun pulls on every planet. Together, these laws form something like a machine for predicting motion. Nobody has ever built anything like it before. Before this book, a falling apple and an orbiting planet seem to belong to 2 completely different worlds. Newton places both of them under the exact same law. For the first time in history, Earth and heaven answer to the same rules. The few scholars capable of following the mathematics understand immediately that something extraordinary has happened. But the book itself is dense and difficult. Its first printing is small. Its full influence will take decades to spread beyond a small circle of readers. Then, in 1693, Newton suffers a severe breakdown. Insomnia, paranoia, memory loss, weeks without any real sleep. He writes accusing letters to close friends and later has to apologize for every one of them. Historians still argue about the cause. Some blame mercury poisoning from years spent secretly experimenting with dangerous alchemical substances. Others point to a broken friendship or simple exhaustion. No single answer has ever been fully settled. His private papers, discovered long after his death, reveal something surprising. Alchemy and Bible study filled far more of his life than the public ever suspected. Newton had explained the modern universe, but part of his own mind still belonged to an older, hidden world. He recovers, and in 1696 he takes on a completely different kind of job. Warden of the Royal Mint. England's silver coins are in crisis. Years of clipping and counterfeiting have left many coins underweight and nearly worthless. Newton joins right in the middle of a massive project to replace the entire currency. The Mint's senior official is mostly absent and unreliable, so the real work quickly falls onto Newton instead. He is only supposed to be a manager. Instead, he goes undercover in taverns and prisons to gather evidence himself. He personally conducts more than 100 interrogations, and he hunts down England's most dangerous counterfeiter, a man named William Challoner, with the same relentless precision he once used to explain gravity. In 1699, Challoner is executed. The same mind that could not tolerate an imperfect calculation could not tolerate a corrupted coin either. By 1703, Newton becomes president of the Royal Society, a position he holds for the rest of his life. And here is the secret that took 200 years to come out. A German mathematician named Gottfried Leibniz publishes his own version of calculus years before Newton ever does. Supporters on both sides of the English Channel take sides. For many in England, this stops being just a mathematical question. It becomes a matter of national pride. But for Newton, it is something even more personal. Calculus is his invention. It is his language for motion, built alone during the plague years and never published at the time. He simply cannot let this go. So Newton does something almost nobody knew about for 2 centuries. As president, he secretly appoints the Royal Society's own independent committee to investigate the dispute. Then he writes the committee's final report himself. After that, writing under a different name, he publishes a very positive review of his own report inside the Society's own journal. One final, hidden act from a man who needed to be certain he was right, even when nobody else was watching. Was Newton protecting his legacy or controlling it? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if this story surprised you, leave a like. Newton is knighted in 1705. He dies in 1727 and is buried with extraordinary ceremony in Westminster Abbey among Britain's kings and national heroes. The writer Voltaire happened to be in England at the time. He later said that Newton was buried like a king who had done well by his subjects. We cannot know whether the losses of Newton's childhood sent him searching for rules that could never abandon him. But the pattern is hard to ignore. He found those rules, eventually. He found them in the orbit of every planet and in the fall of every object in the universe. Yet the same hunger that helped him uncover the law of universal gravitation also kept almost everyone at a real distance from him. This is not a warning against ambition, and it is not a simple lesson about hard work either. It is something more honest than either of those. Whatever drives us toward greatness does not just disappear once we succeed. It often keeps quietly running in the background long after the achievement itself is done. Recognizing what is actually driving us may be what gives us a real chance. A chance not to pay the same price he did. Isaac Newton began life as a boy left behind by the person he needed most. He ended it as the man who showed that earth and heaven follow the same laws. Along the way, he quietly broke a few of his own rules too. If you want to meet another brilliant mind who paid a real price for the truth, watch our video on Alan Turing next. Subscribe to EraSpeak for a new history story every 2 days, and keep learning English, one discovery at a time.